Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second session of our Warm Homes Week. We're going to be exploring a vitally important area today, looking at how to protect vulnerable consumers when driving the uptake of low carbon heating. Join with me on the panel, we've got some excellent speakers. Nasheen Hussain, who's the Executive Director at the Home Group. Our very own Bryony Holyrood, who's works in our innovation team, and she's going to be talking to you a little bit about some of the practical work that we're doing to look to decarbonise heat. Got anybody that knows us, a long-standing friend of NEA's in Chris Train, who's the Energy Networks Association's Gas Goes Green champion. I should have put my teeth in for that one. Apologies, Chris. Juliet Phillips, who does some outstanding work with the Energy Efficiency Infrastructure Group, who looks to coordinate lots of activity on advocacy around that key area. And George Young, who joins us from Scottish Power Energy Networks and is in charge of customer experience and data insights. So a big warm welcome to our panel. Just by way of setting the scene briefly, I think it's true to say that decarbonising heat is an area that's full of challenges, but by equal measure, absolutely essential, and full of opportunities for households and the economy. When we're talking about fuel poor households, low income households, they are disproportionately living in the least efficient homes, and certainly off the gas network are reliant on some pretty expensive and high polluting fuels. We know that those households have already rightly been highlighted for priority action by central government through making use of programmes in England, at least, called the Home Upgrade Grant, to move them onto clean heat and crucially improve the fabric of their properties at the same time. We know that when that can be done, there are huge opportunities for those households to cut their energy costs. And we also know that increasingly we'll need to get at some of these thorny challenges for households that are on the gas network. And certainly Bryony's presentation later will touch on those initiatives that are seeking to do just that. The mission to decarbonise heat is only really just beginning. Whilst we've made steady progress in terms of reducing space heating demand, and there have been programmes available like the renewable heat incentive for mainly affluent households to be able to switch to renewable forms of heating. The quest to look to make deep strides in terms of changing or modifying our approaches to how we heat our homes and the primary heating that we use are really we're really still in the foothills compared to other European countries. So many of the topics that we're going to be exploring today are either theoretical, or the issues that we're encountering are perhaps less well known as they might be if we were looking at other policy areas, particularly energy efficiency. But some of the key challenges and opportunities that are very evident can help inform good practice in this space. And we know that we've got over 100 delegates here listening in, taking keen notes to find out how we address some of the pitfalls and how we look to make sure that the drive towards low carbon heating is effective and as positive as it can be for low income and vulnerable households. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Nasheen and ask you to give us your reflections on how we look to drive the uptake of low carbon heating for low income households. Nasheen.
Thank you, Peter. So just by way of an introduction, first of all, so my name is Nasheen Hussain. I'm Executive Director of Business Development for Home Group. And we're one of the UK's largest housing associations with a rich history spanning over 90 years. And we provide 55,000 homes for over 120,000 customers. And we also work with the NHS to provide integrated health, housing and social care to create independent living and sustainable housing and care to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. The current situation is by far our sort of key priority when it comes to our customers and our homes. Currently, 13% of our customers are in fuel poverty, and 50% of our customers are actually at risk of fuel poverty, especially in light of the current situation. That figure is ever increasing. And 30% of our homes are below a band C, which makes them older and hard to heat and treat. And 86% of our customers have gas as their main heat source, and 10% of our customers in mainly the newer homes have electricity as their main heat source. So the immediate challenges that we face, that our customers face, is obviously we've got the end of the universal credit uplift, which is imminent, the end of furlough as a result of coming out of the pandemic, a rise in energy price cap, and of course the most recent sort of headlines that we're seeing today in terms of shortage of supply. The general rise in prices, access to goods, Brexit, and the ongoing impact of the pandemic. And all of the above pushes our customers and people across the country further into fuel poverty. In terms of the medium to longer term challenges that we face, we have a huge decarbonisation challenge for the sector. And the sector makes up around 14% of the country's homes. The energy supply is not entirely aligned with the ambition to be greener and more sustainable. And currently electricity is circa 4 times more expensive than gas. There is also a general sort of lack of awareness nationally on sustainability and what it actually means to get to net zero. Technology is forever evolving and often very difficult to use and not entirely user-friendly. And there is a huge skills gap, especially when it comes to installation of heat pumps. So our immediate sort of approach at this current moment is to be sort of holistic in our approach and to provide in-house financial advice to our customers who've been hit by the energy price cap increase and the end of the universal credit uplift. And that includes proactively communicating to those customers who are most vulnerable through a targeted comms campaign. We're also providing in-home energy advice visits to customers in the poorest EPC rated properties within our portfolio. This is ahead of any retrofit demonstrators and pilots we have planned. We know that this winter is going to be tough, and that's why our proactive communication campaign has started at the beginning of this month to try and contact those customers most in need. We're also partnering with external fuel poverty advice services like Connect for Help to provide a wraparound advice service around switching tariffs, applying for warm homes discount, and in-home energy visits through local energy advice project. And we're rolling all of our fuel poverty response into business as usual activity so that all of our colleagues know how to help customers who are really struggling. In terms of our sort of medium to longer term approach, we believe that early customer engagement is absolutely vital on our journey to decarbonising our homes and our roadmap to net zero. And there is a lot of work to do to ensure that there is alignment of customer goals and aspirations to net zero. And that's not just for us, that is a national issue. There is a huge lack of awareness as to what net zero is. And therefore we do feel that there is a need for a national awareness campaign, which is backed by the government. We must optimise energy within our homes based on archetype, and we have a huge variety of different archetypes within our asset portfolio, which makes it even more challenging. Plugging the skills gap, I already referred to the lack of installers out there nationally, and we think that there is an immediate need for a national skills academy. In terms of the government's 10-point plan, one of the ambitions is to have 600,000 heat pump installations taking place every year. Currently, there are only around 900 heat pump installers in this country. So a huge issue and a huge shortfall. We must baseline and benchmark the outputs from any retrofit pilots that we do and share that information across the sector and beyond. And we believe that collaboration is key in terms of sector-wide collaboration, which we often shy away from. And this joined-up approach is fundamental to dealing with fuel poverty and greening our homes. And that's why we're a founding member of the Greener Future Partnerships, which is a unique collaboration of UK's 5 leading social housing providers, which includes ABRI, Anchor, Hanover, Home Group, Hyde Group and Sanctuary Group. And we all share a core objective of creating sustainable tenancies, homes and communities. And we also believe that as housing associations, we have a unique relationship with our customers and are best positioned to be able to develop a deeper understanding of how customers can be engaged and encouraged to adopt new technologies and fabric solutions. As I said, there are larger sort of macroeconomic and policy issues which need to be addressed. For example, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which is aimed at decarbonising social homes, is only a drop in the ocean, with the 3.8 billion only covering 4% of the investment that is needed across the sector. We've got competing investment challenges, so building safety, fire safety, net zero, and our resources are finite and there is a limited funding pool. And then government policy also needs to consider the impact on residents. For example, I referred to earlier the electricity price versus gas price. We're putting more customers at risk of fuel poverty by moving them onto the newer technology like heat pumps. Warm homes discount is merely a sticky plaster for those in fuel poverty. Eco funding, we know that only 15% of those who are most vulnerable are able to actually access the funding that is currently available. So it's not getting to those who are most at need. There's huge infrastructure investment requirements, so the national grid and gas, especially if we are going to look at solutions like hydrogen, which requires huge investment. And then the supply volatility, which is very much making the headlines at the moment, our exposure to weather vulnerabilities and the macroeconomic environment that needs to be considered in terms of the impact it has on prices. So with that, I shall leave you with some sort of big thoughts with regards to what needs fixing, but there is a huge amount that needs to be looked at if we are really going to deliver decarbonising our homes nationally as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nosheen. Some excellent points there, particularly driving up the need to drive up awareness and address clear skills gaps. So thank you very much for that. I think carrying on a similar sort of line, we're going to now hear from Bryony, who's going to take you through some of the insights that we've got from delivering heat decarbonisation on the ground, particularly for low income and vulnerable households. Bryony's kindly been brave enough to try and drive a presentation as well. So at this point, I'll hand over to you, Bryony, and hope that you can share your screen with us.
Thank you, and I hope everybody can see that. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you today about the electrification of heat demonstration project. Now, I note that this doesn't work only with vulnerable customers, but many of the learnings so far are particularly relevant for them. This is a scheme that's funded by BEIS. The government wanted to demonstrate the feasibility of a large-scale rollout of heat pumps, particularly identifying and overcoming barriers to deployment. Apart from the known issue of the purchase cost, these were installed for free. And to try and make heat pumps a viable option for the majority of us who are on the gas grid, as well as improving the heat pump supply chain. So as part of that, E.ON are delivering over 300 heat pumps to households across mainly Newcastle City Council area. And the sample of homes selected is designed to be representative of the whole UK housing stock and also the demographics of the UK. Over 85% of the homes have to be on the gas network, and the project has to provide monitoring and also aftercare. These are the project partners. Newcastle City Council are publicising the scheme, and NEA are involved in giving the advice, and these are the brands of heat pump that are being installed. So we are here. By the time people are referred through to NEA for advice, E.ON have recruited people, carried out surveys and installed the heat pump. And then they're referred to us for energy and heat pump information and advice. Anybody who needs assessment of benefits, billing or budgeting information or any other assistance, we can refer through to NEA's Warm and Safe Homes advice team. So why are we doing this? Clearly it's a huge change in their heating type, and there's a need for hand-holding and intensive support. But the fact that most of the householders are owner-occupiers means that they're more engaged. They requested the changes by applying to be part of this scheme. Some want to know the principles of how it works, but all of them need to know how to use it on a day-to-day basis. And many of these households are still vulnerable and can't afford to use more energy and cost than needed. The type of advice we offer covers obviously identifying any outstanding issues and assistance that they need as part of the scheme, but mainly explaining how they need to best use the system to make it work for their comfort and costs, and offering tariff advice if they need to switch to be on the best tariff for their new energy needs. From our experience so far, you can see that about 60% of the households have received hybrid heating systems and 40% electric only of different types. The majority were on the gas network previously. And this one's key, that of the households we've spoken to so far, almost 90% have taken up the advice offered, which is huge and shows the level of demand for this assistance. Also that 60% of them also wanted a tariff comparison done. Not all were in the market to switch immediately. Some wanted us to do calculations of to estimate what their energy use would be over the coming year with their new heat pump. So they had the figures to type into a tariff comparison site when the time came. Now, this touch point to provide advice has also helped us to resolve some early issues in the project. A significant number of people felt that they didn't know enough about how to use the programme or the controls for the heat pump. So we were able to refer this back to E.ON to ask their installers and to talk people through this in more detail when the system was installed. But it did flag up that there is no customer-facing quick start guide available from the manufacturers, which most customers view as an essential item for them to refer to when they've forgotten. The manual doesn't fill this need. It's too big and complex, and it's in technical jargon. It seems more aimed at the installer themselves. So there needs to be something in simple, plain English with a relatively low reading age. We developed some basic instructions to send to them in the meantime. We were also able to assist with initial cost concerns. This project started to install heat pumps in December 2020. And for 3 or 4 weeks in January and February of this year, there was particularly harsh weather. Now, heat pumps skew the energy use from summer towards winter more than normal. And so obviously having a heat pump installed in the coldest period of the year was going to be a concern for some people, but particularly with this harsh weather. We also identified people who were on what was now the wrong tariff for them. Perhaps it was a good deal when they were on mainly gas, but more expensive now they were using more electricity. And also a few people who had issues of previous underpayment for various reasons. In all these situations, our explanation of what the issue was and providing reinsurance was really important, as well as referring them for further support if needed to E.ON or our WASH team. Some more structural issues we found was particularly around prepayment meters. Now, I've already mentioned that heat pumps skew the people's energy use from summer towards winter more than normal. Now, obviously, somebody who is using a prepayment meter to budget their energy bills, they're not able to spread the cost. And for this reason, E.ON have actually stopped accepting people who have a prepayment meter onto this scheme because of the danger of them self-disconnecting through being put into financial hardship if there's a particularly cold period of weather. We also found that lots of people, more than we expected, still needed the basic cavity wall and loft insulation that could be provided as part of this scheme. Most were loft top-ups, but you always get some people who can't have it for logistical reasons, and also other people who needed more complex and expensive types of insulation that couldn't be covered as part of the scheme. Gas capping was an interesting one. Quite a few of those who received electric heat pumps and had no other gas appliances in their home wanted to stop paying the standing charge. You have to be careful what you ask for. If somebody asks to have their gas removed, that's a lot more expensive than just asking to have the gas capped. And some suppliers require the meter to be removed to do this, others don't. This lack of standard process and also costs make it really hard as an advisor to properly advise people. And there's also a lack of knowledge in the energy companies. It's the supplier who's responsible for removing the meter if needed, but some were erroneously referring people through to Northern Gas Networks, the gas distribution network in our region. There was also still poor knowledge of the Priority Service Register. You can see that we newly registered quite a few people, mainly those who were over 65 with children under 5 and those with well-managed medical conditions. Key challenges were that all renewable energy installations have to produce what's called an MCS 031 estimate, which is based on, it tells you what the heating system's going to use and what it's going to cost, but it's based on the theoretical heat need of the home, assuming heating to 18 degrees and 21 in the living room, not how the household actually uses their heating. So as advisors, we need better information on how to best advise where this is very different from how the household uses their heating, particularly at low and high use cases. Obviously, energy tariffs are a key issue. Just to highlight, there is a specific lack of heat pump tariffs, and some of those that do exist are not actually a very good deal. Some of the best deals we found were actually electric vehicle tariffs, but obviously most of those require people to have an electric vehicle, which limits them to the richer households that are more likely to have one. Another issue is that because variable time of use tariffs are not, can't be dealt with by your standard comparison websites, they don't actually show them. So unless people are in the know, then it's very hard to find out about these and get on them. And then, of course, we have the differential between electricity and gas prices. It's already been mentioned that even at the high efficiencies of a heat pump, it is still more expensive to use than gas. And that was before the huge price rises recently. And finally, Every household's needs are different. We need to make sure that whatever's installed is tailored to meet those needs so that they can live in comfort and without excess cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bryony. A fantastic overview of a very complicated area and some of the practical ways in which it can bamboozle and frustrate, but also go right. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure people have got questions of the project. Just to say briefly before I hand over to Chris, if you do have any questions for our speakers, please do use the Q&A function. I can see one or two coming in, but if you could ask your questions in the Q&A function, then we'll have a ready list when we get there. I'm going to now hand over to Chris. Thank you very much again for joining us, Chris. Can I ask you to give your views on this area?
Lovely. Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much, Bryony. That was very interesting. So I've been working in energy and utilities for 38 years now, and 2 years ago I stepped down as chief executive of Cadent, the largest of the gas distribution companies, and since that time I've been working through the Energy Network Association as the green gas champion, which can be a bit of a tautology, as Peter found out in his introduction. So what did that mean? That was really pulling together the work that all of the networks, so the 4 gas distribution networks and National Grid as the transmission network, pulling together their work into a strategy for the deployment of green gases, and particularly the role of hydrogen and the development of hydrogen, and interfacing with government with respect to policy and policy developments that are necessary, and coordinating the efforts of those gas networks. So I also sit on the government's Hydrogen Advisory Council and act as the council's champion on the standards and regulation work group. So to decarbonise heat, we need a whole system approach. And I think if I went back in time 12, 18 months, I think the debate was very much characterised as an either or, an either electric or a hydrogen. And actually, I think that is very destructive, because the reality of the challenge, I think people appreciate now, is that you need both, and you need all technologies in order to be able to achieve decarbonisation efficiently and effectively. So whether that's electric heat pumps, or whether it's hydrogen boilers, or whether it's heat networks, all of that needs to be taken into account. But as has already been mentioned by Bryony, we mustn't forget energy efficiency and the quality of our housing stock, because we need solutions that drive for the whole system and for everyone. We don't, not just the early adopters of the technology, we need an energy system that works for all. And I like to use Birmingham University's National Centre for the Decarbonisation of Heat in Tyseley as an example. For anybody that knows Tyseley, it's a suburb of Birmingham, and I think it characterises actually the requirement for local planning when it comes to the decarbonisation of heat. There is a waste incinerator, so there's the opportunity for heat networks. There is the development of electrolyzed hydrogen for transport, and the potential for other uses in industry and commerce in the local area. And there are, quite frankly, some very poor quality housing stock. And all of these need a solution. And actually, you need a level of local knowledge to be able to develop and deploy that solution. We've done quite a lot of customer research, as well as the technical research around hydrogen and the deployment of hydrogen for heat. And it's what the academics call a low engagement topic, which kind of means that people know about it, but you've got to be really prompting in the way that you ask questions. And I think the 3 areas that come out of that engagement are that customers want to minimize disruption, and they want it to be simple. They want heat when you want it. They want the controllability of that heat, and they want it to be affordable. And that is kind of critical, as we've seen, particularly in the current environment. So the pathway to a hydrogen network is really the work that the networks have been doing around the demonstration of hydrogen as an option. And I think when it comes to industry, everybody agrees that if we want to maintain an industrial base in this country and not ship it off to other parts of the world, then we need a strategy for decarbonising industry, and that has driven the industrial cluster strategy. And we need a strategy for heavy transport. And again, hydrogen is a good vector when it comes to the decarbonisation of heavy transport. And the area that's slightly more uncertain actually is the topic of this afternoon's discussion, which is the decarbonisation of domestic heating and the opportunity to repurpose our existing infrastructure and get a better understanding about how the technology will work in a real environment. And those of you at the NEA up in the Northeast will be fully aware of the hydrogen house that Northern Gas Networks and Cadent have built, or houses, there's two of them, up in Winlayton and Gateshead, to demonstrate hydrogen for heating and household use. And in a way, it's fantastic because it's completely unremarkable in the sense that you go in the house and it's very familiar. You've got a boiler on the wall, you've got a gas cooker, and you've got a gas fire in the living room. So very similar to the options you have today. And one of the areas around cost that is particularly important, I think, is all of the 4 major boiler manufacturers have said that they will produce hydrogen-ready boilers for the same price as their current boilers, their current natural gas boilers. So it is literally just taking the existing unit off the wall and putting a hydrogen-ready unit on the wall in its place. And then the last element, which is often discussed, which is the blending of hydrogen into existing natural gas. And we can do that at the moment up to quantities of 20% without impacting on the appliances in the home. So current appliances in the home will take up to a 20% blend. And Cadent have demonstrated that through a project with Keele University on the Keele University campus. And that is the broader High Deploy or High Deploy Phase 2 project up in Winlayton, which has facilitated the 2 hydrogen houses. So we were very pleased at the back end of November that the government produced and published its hydrogen strategy and a suite of associated documents that go with that. And I guess the key highlight for us that the government are taking a very producer-led strategy to have so that we will have 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production by 2030. That they will invest in £900 million worth of support funding in order to achieve this, and that there's a commitment from the government that hydrogen will contribute a large part of our energy system, up to 35% of primary energy from hydrogen by 2050, and a commitment to continue to explore hydrogen's role in residential heat. And networks have given their commitment to continuing the trials that demonstrate hydrogen as heat. The SGN H100 project up in Fife, where they're demonstrating hydrogen as neighbourhood, the commitment to deliver a village trial by 2025 and a town trial by 2030, leading hopefully to a policy decision in 2026. And they gave that commitment to mandating hydrogen-ready boilers by 2026, which in my mind is a bit of a no-brainer step in delivering hydrogen as an option for domestic heat in the home. So I was asked to say what are some of the key challenges. I think, as I said earlier, that I think there's a strong recognition that we need hydrogen for industry and we need hydrogen for heavy transports. We need to continue the demonstration that we can repurpose the existing gas network for hydrogen instead of natural gas. And we have fortuitously, in many ways, almost replaced up to 80% of the current network from cast iron and ductile iron to polyethylene. And so that gives us an investment that is largely ready if we needed to convert over to hydrogen as planned. It's critical that we get coordination across the whole supply chain around this delivery, and I think we've had a good track record in the developments to date. Transition planning, how does this look? So how can people make their investment decisions when it comes to decarbonisation of heat is absolutely key. Policy frameworks that allow and facilitate that. And I would add the imperative of pace and time, in that 2050 actually is not very long away when you look at the cycle of everything that we need to achieve in that time. So we need to develop an energy system that works for all customers, which is why I very much welcome the discussion here this afternoon. And we need to drive that efficiently so that we can minimize and stabilize the costs to achieve, and that customers have choice in how they deliver a net zero home. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thank you. I'm going to move us swiftly on to Juliet Phillips. I know people have questions of what Chris has rightly highlighted, but Juliet, can I ask you to make your remarks on this key topic, please?
Thanks, Peter, and great to join everyone this afternoon. Really important discussion. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I'm a senior policy advisor at E3G, which is an independent climate change think tank, and my work spans the policies and politics of green homes, as well as the financial solutions which are needed to underpin them. And a lot of our work's done through convening cross-sectorial coalitions, including the Energy Efficiency Infrastructure Group, or the EEIG, which is the hat I'm wearing today within my capacity as the advocacy coordinator for that group. The EEIG, for those who don't know us, is a broad-based coalition of over 25 industry groups and charities, with members including CBI, Energy UK, the Installation Assurance Authority, and National Energy Action. Though I should say, as a little disclaimer, the views represented here do not necessarily reflect the views of all members. So yeah, I think today's discussion is particularly relevant in light of what's going on at the moment with the ongoing energy crunch. There's lots of more people are thinking about what it means to move away from reliance on fossil gas heating. Obviously, there's no silver bullet solutions to the current crunch, and shifting away from reliance on fossil gas is just one part of the longer term transition. But nonetheless, I think what the current situation has underscored is the importance of answering these really tricky questions on how we can ensure a smooth transition to a zero emissions economy, which works for everyone. So a couple of comments on the broader picture. Currently, around 85% of our homes use fossil gas, and a huge transition is required if we're going to get on track for the CCC's advice. Around 75% of homes should be heated with a heat pump by 2050. As we all know, the current rate of installations is far too low. We really welcome the ambition set by the government last year to get on track to 600,000 heat pumps installations being installed per year by 2028, which would be a huge uptick from the current tens of thousands, but still actually goes under the CCC's balance pathway, which says that in that timeline need to be getting to about 900,000 per year. And it's a similar story for district heating, where a similar uptake will also be needed. And just to clarify, we're not saying that everyone needs to have their boilers ripped out tomorrow. Rather, we really need to get on track to start sustainably building the market in a sensible way, including supporting vulnerable homes through that process. We need to make sure that households aren't getting left behind as regulations change, but rather positioned to benefit from the positive opportunities related to clean heat. And I should say up front as well, we really support the fabric first approach, which ensures that the appropriate amount of energy efficiency measures have been taken prior to the installation of heat pumps to reduce the amount of energy that we're using in the first place. And fuel poor homes have always been a huge consideration of the EEIG in making sure that those households are supported through the transition. And in the context of clean heat, we think this should include fully covering the upfront costs associated with heat pumps and complementary energy efficiency measures. And with this in mind and the spending review looming, a priority call for action for the EEIG at the moment is for the government to fulfil the commitments in the Conservative manifesto for fuel poor homes, which includes the Home Upgrade Grant and the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. And we're also asking the government to pump prime a mass market for heat pumps as well through expanding grant support, including the Clean Heat Grant, making sure, of course, that the fabric first approach is embedded. So we're calling for a significant upfront cost increase, which should obviously include supporting the full cost for low income households, but also £6,000 for others as well, to make sure that we can pump prime this market to bring down costs. And these measures will allow low income and fuel poor homes to participate in the clean heat transition. However, we recognise that cash injections can't be considered in isolation, and you can't just throw money at this problem, which is a thorny one. And I just want to quickly run through some of the other major issues which we think need to be addressed by the government in order to get us on track this decade. And happily, these reflect some of the themes which have already been mentioned during the panel. So first, and a really big one, is rebalancing the economics of heat. We've heard from a number of speakers that currently electricity is more expensive than gas, and in part that's down to the way that bills are structured, with environmental taxes making up nearly a quarter of the electricity bill. Although this doesn't always necessarily make a heat pump more expensive to run in a well-insulated house, as they're very efficient. Nonetheless, it's really important that we address this to make sure that vulnerable homes aren't left paying more for the running costs. And there's been discussions around removing the environmental levies from the electricity bill altogether, or considering green checks to support low-income households with the running costs. Secondly, and another theme which has already been picked up, is the need to really focus on scaling skills and supply chains, recognising at current times we don't have the workforce required to carry out the changes on the scale required. This is also a major opportunity as well to support green jobs and a just transition for those currently working in the gas supply chain. So, for example, new research commissioned by Greenpeace just last week found that a sustained focus on the deployment of clean heat could result in 44,000 net jobs created in 2025. So good opportunities here. Another critical area, which again has already been mentioned, but just to touch upon it quickly, is of course the need to focus on customer protection, advice and aftercare services. I think Bryony's presentation really nicely demonstrated how it's really important to make sure that all that information is available, with more hand-holding as well through the process, particularly for those who are less up to speed or whatever with some of the nuances of what's going on. And related, we need to really make sure there's a focus on ensuring high quality as well. So making sure that any installations are to the highest standards, which in turn will help increase consumer confidence in the transition. And another point which has been picked up already, but awareness raising campaigns as well can have a really important role to play. As we know, awareness is currently fairly low, and we need to boost this and raise awareness of the benefits as well of moving clean heat. And yeah, the final point I'll touch upon is the benefits associated with creating the economies of scale, which can bring down the cost of installation and technology for all. As has been widely reported, heat pumps are currently more expensive from gas boilers, but there are estimates that the cost of technologies can rapidly fall as the market matures and economies of scale grow. And that's one of the reasons why we're calling on the government to help pump prime the market, recognising that this could really support growth. And regulation as well can play an important role if we have, for example, a backstop date on fossil gas boilers, that can really drive the market as well. So really a need for a holistic approach. And there really is a need for a focus on fuel for homes and considering how these will be affected all the way through each of these processes. So yeah, I'm not saying that these homes should be guinea pigs per se, but they should definitely have the opportunities to access positive benefits. Then briefly, a few comments on hydrogen for heating. E3G sees hydrogen as having a really important role to play in decarbonising sectors where electrification isn't an option at the present. So heavy industry and certain freight, etc. And we're definitely not hydrogen, opposed to hydrogen in any way, shape or form. But as Chris mentioned, there are still discussions underway regarding the exact role that hydrogen will play in future heat scenarios. And just very briefly, it's worth explaining the differences between blue hydrogen, which is produced using fossil fuels, and green, produced using electricity, and hopefully eventually renewable electricity. And there's kind of discussions underway about whether blue hydrogen is meaningfully aligned with net zero at the moment, and B, obviously the concerns around continuing to rely on a fuel which is reliant on fossil gas, and we've all seen the impacts that the price volatility can have on households. So aware of time, I'll just wrap up with a few kind of key next steps for us and kind of priorities for government. So first of all, we look forward to the long-awaited heat and building strategy, hope that will come out soon and address some of the wide range of measures I've just kind of run through. Secondly, the spending review, just to really give this a push. This is a really major opportunity for the government to get us on track, pump prime the market and support all households through the transition. The deadline for getting your submissions in is this Thursday, so I really urge you all to make sure that you're putting forward the case for clean heat in your submissions. We really think there's a really important need to rebalance the economics of heat and reconsider how bills are being structured. And finally, just to end on the fact that net zero really needs to be mandated into all fuel poverty schemes, such as eco, and this can in turn help boost the economies of scale, which we need to bring down costs. So I'll wrap up there. Thanks everyone, and really looking forward to a discussion.
Thanks very much, Juliet, and you've done a fantastic job to canter through all the issues as the rest of the panel. Massive topic to try and nibble away at in only an hour and 15 minutes. Final participant in this session provides us with a vital perspective about what this is going to do to demand on our energy networks, particularly at a sort of substation or lower voltage network level. So I'm delighted to ask George Young to provide us with some remarks before we get to the questions that people are busy filling in for our panelists.
Thanks, Peter. I'll try and just give a quick summary. I think a lot of what I'll say hopefully will resonate with the other panel members. But so firstly, just by way of introduction, so I work for SP Energy Networks, so we're one of the 6 electricity distribution network operators in the UK who cover 14 different licence areas. The UK is broken up into 14 licence areas, and we are unique in that we cover Scotland, England and Wales in terms of the geographies or parts of each of those 3 countries, which gives us an interesting perspective around fuel poverty, which we may get to touch on today. But really, our role really is to keep the electricity flowing to, for SP Energy Networks, that's to 6 million people across 3.5 million homes and businesses in those areas. And really, our role is as simple as that: is keep the electricity flowing and keeping the lights on is what traditionally has been the slogan of a lot of the network operators. We don't have the direct relationship with a customer that an energy supplier has, but fundamentally, the move to decarbonisation of heat and of transport is going to have a significant impact on the electricity network and the electricity infrastructure. The distribution network was designed for predictable, stable demand. However, net zero won't bring that. Electricity demand, generation and consumer behaviour are all going to change, and they're all going to change significantly, and that's going to put some big constraints on the electricity network, which really is going to have to size up to cope with that. At the same time, we obviously have to be mindful of the portion of the electricity bill or the energy bill that we impact upon. So we need to keep costs as low as possible, but disproportionately increase the available capacity and, more importantly, the flexibility that the network can provide, whilst keeping those costs as low as possible. I think for us, we see electricity as being at the heart of the drive to decarbonise heat, but not without some big challenges that's going to bring us. If you look at I think Chris actually touched on it a bit in terms of their research. There's some similar research we've done around, so consumer opinions, consumer views are that this is seen as a hygiene factor to individuals. People won't move into a world where there's any constraints upon their usage. So for us as a network operator, we have to be adaptable to be able to cope with that. And probably the biggest change for us is the move away from the traditional reinforcement of the network. So increasing capacity of the network was always us putting extra copper in the ground and extra substations and extra overhead lines, and it's moving into a more flexible world where things like energy efficiency, things like flexibility of usage of energy can offset some of that investment that's required. However, that being said, there will still absolutely be a need to upgrade electricity networks across the UK. And I think the interesting point that Peter touched on there, down into the low voltage network and down into customers' streets, I think big education piece required over the next couple of years is that there is going to be a level of disruption across the UK while we modernise and upscale the network. Fundamentally, a current household that moves into a world of using, potentially using a heat pump and an EV and some sort of distributed generation, that's a completely different model from what the energy network, the electricity network was designed to cope with. So that will bring some key challenges. I think for us as a network operator, key things for us to focus on to help customers decarbonise is, I think first of all, as I said earlier, we're a facilitator to decarbonisation. Customers can't install heat pumps unless the local electricity network can cope with that demand. So that's a fundamental, and what we can't become as I said earlier, is we can't become a constraint to that. We'll be looking to dedicate teams to work with local communities to deliver that energy infrastructure that's required down into the community levels. And I think that's something that's a key change for us, is that we need to be engaging at that local level to understand local needs. And you'll hear quite a lot of talk about community energy, and that's something that's it's at the heart of our future looking plans, is to engage in that. Other thing for us, I say, really, two areas of focus. So one is that absolutely we need to ensure the network can cope, and that's absolutely front and centre of our policy. But I think the second thing is, and again, common theme from what everyone's touched on today, is that we need to be in a position to help support customers who need it most. And I think Juliette touched on just transition as well. We have to be very, very careful that as we move to decarbonise, that we don't actually create an unjust transition, and we end up building a network and building an infrastructure that helps those who are the early adopters of these technologies. So we have to ensure that we can do whatever we can to support it. So certainly for us as a company, we're looking to support somewhere in the region of 300,000 customers over the next 5 years as part of our latest business plan. And that can be across, again, a lot of the things that's been discussed earlier about, I think, education and awareness of that changing energy landscape is definitely a big thing for us. As is partnering with and signposting to organisations that can provide that support, that advice, that funding. It's not something that we're looking to do ourselves, but it's certainly something that we can look to, if we can be in the middle to kind of harness the network and the customer and help point people in the right direction, then it's something we'll certainly look to do. And I think also for us is starting to look at, whether there's innovative technological solutions out there that can help reduce energy usage, and this is probably where it becomes a bit of uncharted territory for us, because as I touched on earlier, if we as a network operator can reap the benefits of consumers being more energy efficient, so it's in everyone's best interests. So if we can help facilitate some of that through the use of innovation, be that down into load shedding at the local network, or load shedding even ultimately down into customers' homes, then that's sort of technologies that we need to be looking at. In terms of challenges, just to wrap up, so I think for us, what first one I touched on before is that we're likely to see strong uptake in certain areas, that those kind of early adopters of some of the technology. But what that does to us as a network operator is that places that undue load on the network. So that's something that we have to be mindful of. And as I say, what we don't want to be doing is spending money ahead of need, to upgrade networks where required. But we also need to balance the fact that as the demand increases, we have to be flexible enough to cope with that. And I think secondly, it's been mindful of, we've got something in the region of, I think, about a fifth of our customer base are currently fuel classed as being in fuel poverty, and probably about another fifth who are at risk of dropping into fuel poverty over the next 5 years. So we need to be very, very mindful of that as well. That there are groups of customers out there who can't afford the capital cost or the running costs. So we have to see what we can do, but be mindful that ultimately, we're a distribution network operator. We're not an indirect, something that should be funded through taxation to support customers. But we can look at what we can do to support as best we can, and it's in a kind of cost efficient manner as possible. I think just summarising very quickly, conscious of time, but I think for us, I think Nasheen touched on it as well. I think knowledge is a big thing. I think that's a role that we can play. We can help educate customers. We're neutral in terms of across the energy sector. We're a regionalised monopoly within the distribution network, but we can provide impartial advice and knowledge across the base. Really, and that can focus on the financial aspects of it. It can focus on the technical capabilities that a couple of the guys have touched on around new technologies, and it can also focus on some of that opportunity. And I think one of the biggest things we've seen coming out of our research is the opportunity and the willingness for customers to take what they perceive as a risk to change. So I think that's really where we think we can play a role, kind of at the front and centre of that education and awareness, in parallel with dealing with the network, the technical challenges that the network will bring.
Great stuff, George. Thank you very much for offering that perspective. Often these issues are looked in a very technical way, technologies versus technologies. And in this session, we've tried to put people at the heart of that discussion and think of the implication from their point of view. But you're right to bring that back to the sort of systems-wide implications that this will all have. I'm going to ask some pretty quick-fire questions now to make sure that we're doing justice to some fantastic and slightly provocative questions in some instances. I would just like to thank those people on the panel that have already been answering questions, and hopefully that those answers are suitably detailed. Tell us if not. But yeah, just to ask any of our panelists, but particularly Bryony, given that she was the one that rightly raised this issue, is there any financial support available for gas capping? We're aware of the challenges and the cost of looking to do that. Are you aware of any financial support? Sorry, if you're on mute, please unmute yourself.
I'll jump in there. I did reply to it on the thread, but there was some funding provided as part of the project to cover the costs for those households who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford to have their gas capped off. But I'm not aware that was specific to this electrification of heat trial. and I'm not aware of any funding to do that in general, out in the market.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I didn't spot it. By the time I noted it down on my pad, I think you got to it. So thanks for your fast fingers on that. Also, a related point is whether or not...
Can I just make a point to that?
Yes,
Peter?
Chris.
Because it is kind of, so you can always ask your supplier to take the meter away, and it's their responsibility to do that, and they will cap the service at that point in time. But within 12 months after it has been capped, then the gas safety management regulations require the network operator to essentially take that gas service away. So there's a question in there about, can you unwind? And it's making sure you unwind if you have a decision to do so before the gas safety management regulation cutoff occurs.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important clarification, particularly the cost of sort of paying down those standing charges in the interim as well is related to that. One other factor which Bronnie didn't touch upon, which I'm very interested in, particularly George's views on, is do you think that there's a reliable way of ensuring that households that need an uprated connection to decarbonise their heating to electricity have a sort of standard mechanism that they can use to do just that, uprate their network connection?
I think it's an interesting point. I think really the onus is on us as network operators to identify that need where we can identify ahead of need, because there's two challenges. There's one, there's at the actual household itself, but there's two it's touched on earlier, into that low voltage network in the street. So I think really the onus needs to be on the network operator to do that what we call an industry load checking, to try and say whether we can standardise that. Not sure. I think we can model it based on data we have. I'm not sure how well we can standardise it at the moment, but definitely that's a key area that definitely sits in our remit to fix that.
Thank you. I think that's something that NEA and other organisations would love to work with you and the other DNOs on, is to provide a standardised way of doing that. And it looks like it's going to be a key challenge in the future. Can I ask all of the panel just how fundamental they feel that reducing space heating demand through insulation and fabric improvement is before we look at primary heating? Obviously, fabric first is a term that's often used, but can often be overlooked, particularly if there's generous incentives for generating renewable heat, as is currently the case under the RHI. Can I ask each panelist very, very quickly on a rating of 1 to 5, say how important they think it is? If I start with Bryony. You can just do that if you like.
Yeah, 5.
I thought you were waving at me, but
I was going to say, it's difficult when we see all these ad hoc programs for encouraging greening of the home that don't include all the insulation that's needed. I mean, we saw that with this study that's ongoing, that some people needed, for example, flat roof insulation, room in roof insulation, and that couldn't be included because of the limits on how much could be spent per household. And obviously, if you're going to have a heat pump, you really need all the insulation you can get, so it's working most efficiently.
So it's a 5 from you. Okay, Juliet?
Yeah, probably not surprising from the Energy Efficiency Infrastructure Group, an absolute 5. And I would add into the mix as well, we also really need to focus on flexibility and storage as well, as we need to consider the transition as a whole to clean economy.
Fantastic. Chris?
It's a 5 from me also. In the 38 years of my career, energy efficiency has been a holy grail, and we've had a lot of false starts.
Thank you for that. Nasheen?
Yes, another 5. I think as human beings, we all have a responsibility to be as efficient as possible and as economical as possible by ensuring that we adopt a fabric first approach before we install any energy efficiency measures.
Fantastic. I'm hoping for a clean sweep here, George, but don't feel that you need to go along with the rest of everybody's views.
No, absolutely, I absolutely agree, Peter.
Okay.
For us, it's anything that can avoid unnecessary, selfish hat on, anything that can avoid unnecessary reinforcement of the network is definitely in our sweet spot.
Okay, well, that's the easy one dealt with. Now I'm going to ask a slightly more challenging one. Do the panelists support the removal of levies on electricity, obviously to try and incentivise further uptake of heating, electrified heating? And you can obviously there are a number of ways in which you can skin that particular cat and look to do it. But in general, do people support the removal of those levies? And although the question didn't ask this, I guess the implication is putting them somewhere, either into general taxation or looking to push them over to gas. So if I could ask people for their brief remarks and views on this key and omnipresent topic, then that'd be great. If I could go to Nasheen first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think something definitely needs to be done. I think there's a need for an entire holistic energy price reform. I don't think they should be pushed over onto gas, because there are people we know at this moment in time who are struggling and are in fuel poverty and cannot afford to pay their gas bills or are borderline as a result of things like the pandemic, etc. So we can't just push the problem from one group of people to another. So I think there needs to be a holistic approach to this, and the energy pricing needs to be looked at to make it as fair as possible and not to impact those who are most vulnerable.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to say that that's the NEA view, but I'll let Bryony come in.
Thank you. I also think that something needs to be done about the huge electricity prices, the fact that they keep rising faster than gas. And just to highlight that the costs are involved, it's about greening the national grid, which is national infrastructure that we all benefit from, and therefore we should potentially all pay for it through general taxation. I would agree that putting it onto gas bills would be problematic from NEA's point of view, just again, as Nasheen said, because we know people who are already struggling.
Thank you, Bryony. Sorry, I'm going to have to come to some of the other panelists. Juliet?
Yeah, just to really fully support what everyone's already said, really, in consensus here, I think. Probably just to add that, we don't think it's a silver bullet solution. We think it's an important solution and kind of like a no-brainer, really, in some respects, but it does need to be kind of considered as part of a wider suite of measures, also really focusing on building those economies of scales to reduce the upfront costs as well as the running costs.
Thank you. Chris?
So I'm going to be controversial the other way, because I think no. And my rationale for that is it blunts the incentives to do the right thing. It distorts the technologies, and we can see what happens when you do that by looking at the current energy market. I think you need to tackle the issues around fuel poverty separately from that, and I don't think it's a magic bullet to do it. And I think it's worse than a magic bullet, because I think it disincentivizes people to drive the efficiencies, which reduce the costs over time.
Thank you for your view. George?
I think I would maybe sit in the fence somewhere in the middle, to be honest. I think.
Okay. Well, that's absolutely fine. Sorry, George. If you're gonna tease it both sides, then we'll respect your views to be able to sit on that fence, unless you've got anything further to add on this topic.
I was just going to say that I think what we would welcome is a review of it. So rather than giving an answer, we would welcome a review to ensure that there is a fair and just allocation.
And hopefully we're going to get just that with the upcoming call for evidence on affordability and fairness, which should be imminent, as they say in civil servants speak. But I think we've all been a bit frustrated with various publications that are supposed to be out at various times and not quite got there. Can I just ask a quick question? I think this is probably mostly relevant to Chris, but are there any safety concerns with hydrogen storage in properties that also store oil? It sounds like a fireworks party that I wouldn't want to be at, but how about yourself?
So it kind of You can store hydrogen safely as you can store any gas safely, as long as you do it correctly. It's worth noting that the gas network transports 4 to 5 times more energy than the electricity network at peak, and this is one of the reasons we need to think of a total energy solution. And I agree with Juliet that what that means is that we need flexibility within our energy system, which means we need better storage provision.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody got an alternative view on the issues of safety? I think Chris is probably the most qualified to deal with that one. Okay. I've got through a couple of questions. Apologies to the panel for this hospital pass, but I'm just going to ask: has anybody spotted any other questions coming through on the Q&A that they're particularly keen on answering, and are waiting for me to sort of fumble my way to them? If not, then Bryony, yeah, please go for it.
There were a couple of questions for me about how many people would want to go back. Now, this study is ongoing. As I pointed out, this is an early touch point, and people only just had the heat pump installed when we speak to them. So there will be more, you'll no doubt hear more from us after the coming winter when we've been monitoring them. And at that point, we'll know more, especially in the light of all the recent price rises, whether people's costs have gone up or not, and how many people would want to go back to gas. So we'll have to leave that there, but one of the prime aims of the project was to demonstrate that heat pumps could heat the home for a similar cost to gas. Those households that couldn't be insulated adequately to do that were not eligible to take part in the scheme. Some people did see their costs go up slightly if they wanted an all-electric heat pump mainly, but obviously those able to pay customers who wanted to decarbonise decided to go ahead anyway, knowing that their costs were likely to go up. But for those people who had a hybrid heat pump installed, many of them saw cost savings according to the theoretical energy estimates. We will see, as I said, after this winter, what's actually happened in reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Bronnie. Could you also pick up the question about engaging hard to reach individuals? What projects, what work has been done to engage hard to reach individuals in the project? Is it sort of first come, first served in terms of people opting into this project, or how have we engaged hard to reach individuals? I guess you might not know.
So it's Newcastle City Council who've been people advertising this, but Your Homes Newcastle are the social landlord in Newcastle. So they've been advertising it to their residents, obviously with this caveat that they're not able to accept people who are on prepayment meters anymore. Although, as somebody asked, if they want to take part, it's recommended that they switch onto a credit meter so that they can spread their costs, and then they're able to come back and reapply. Other hard to reach in terms of more rural, it's more of an opt-in thing. I know that E.ON have also been advertising it to their own customers. So yeah, they've just been sending information out or phoning people up. I'm not quite sure on how they've been doing that.
And Nosheen, your insight from your in-house energy audits, is that typically engaged people that wouldn't usually kind of clock mainstream advice?
Yeah, look, I think it needs to be very much on a grassroots level if we are to truly reach those who are sort of harder to reach. I don't think it can be done in terms of a kind of mass communication method. So we truly believe in sort of more nuanced ways of reaching those who are more vulnerable. So, for example, those customers who have benefited from energy efficiency measures and have had savings as a result, we will be proactively utilising those customers as green champions to go out and reach out to those customers who are harder to reach and look at more sort of innovative ways of making contact with more vulnerable customers.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our panelists and for all of the delegates in terms of your questions. Apologies if we haven't been able to get to you. I've tried to rattle through a number of the questions. I think what comes out in this session, perhaps surprisingly, is a high degree of consensus on the need to use all the tools in the toolkit to help us decarbonise heat, but crucially underlining the fact that it needs to be decarbonised by default. I think we've all unanimously supported the reduction in space heating demand and the fabric first approach. Absolutely at the heart of delivering this stuff well is minimising disruption to people, making sure that new systems are controllable and most of all affordable, and finally that people absolutely get hand-holding and the level of service and advice and support that will be absolutely vital in terms of making this work. So thank you again to all of our panelists, and I look forward to the next session, which I think is starting in 15 minutes. I think I'll just double check.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Somebody's lurking in the wings, keeping us on track. So thank you very much. Yeah, we're starting in 15 minutes. So if any of you would like to join us for the last session looking at lessons learned on energy efficiency delivery over the years, then please do join us then. But thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.